Welcome, everyone. I'm John Ryan, and I'm pleased to have one of my best sports betting friends in the globe or the world. Take your pick. In Jim Coventry of Rotowire. It's always a blast, and we will be doing a show this Saturday, 11:30 a.m. Been a lot of requests for us to keep doing that, and we plan on doing it all the way through to the Super Bowl. So that'll be
Yes.
good stuff with Jim, who's always helped me with my DraftKings lineups. And I'm telling you guys and gals, when I tweak it based on his player props, which he's going to be going through here, it has paid off. It's helped me make more money than I would have. So kudos to Jim Coventry. How's that?
Thanks, John. Definitely appreciate you. Look, we're both grinders. We both do the best work we can, uncover as many trends. And those who are watching, you have your own leads. If our thoughts align with yours, put money on it. If your thoughts don't align with ours, fade it.
I can't agree more. We're providing information for information purposes only, and
That's it.
use it as you wish.
Yes.
So let's start with the Bears in Detroit. Detroit finally lost a game. Chicago is trying to find ways to win a game, and they are playing better, but their defense, Jim, as you know, since week 8 has been just absolutely atrocious. However, Detroit is giving up the most points in the league at 26.7. The Bears are right behind them at 26.2. That adds up to about 52.9 points, if I'm right, and that is a ton to be giving up each week. So I bet you there's a couple of player props, perhaps on both teams here, that you like.
The DFS angle in this game is big. And the props a little more will settle in on running backs, but you're right. And let's talk about some of these players in this specific game that you might want to stack this game up. At quarterback, you could go either way. Justin Fields is the pay up. Goff is the pay down. Fields has at least 25 fantasy points in every game since week 7, except for in last week's wind-blown sub-zero temperature game against Buffalo. And that was just one of those element games, right? But Fields faced Detroit back in week 10. He put up 43 fantasy points, 147 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns, also threw for 2. Now, the Lions, they give up the most fantasy points in the leagues of quarterbacks. And 6. Now, the rushing game, we know Fields lives on that, right? Well, the Lions have given up at least 59 yards to 6 different running backs. They are hemorrhaging rushing yardage. And Fields has at least 71 yards in 7 of his last 9 games. He's only been under 60 yards once in that time. And also, look, the Lions give up touchdowns, 7 rushing touchdowns to quarterbacks. Fields has rushed for 7 since week 7. They don't have the team speed to deal with him. But if you want to spend down, Jared Goff's your play. He has been great in home games. Other than the Miami game, he's had multiple touchdown passes in every other home game. In those 8 home games, 20 touchdown passes. 300 or more passing yards in 4 of his last 6 home games. Now, Chicago, they've given up 3 300-yard games in their last 7. John mentioned it earlier. The defense has fallen apart. 2 months ago, traded away Robert Quinn. A month or so ago, trade away Roquan Smith. That's probably longer than that at this point. They have the worst pressure rate in the league per Pro Football Focus. They're bottom 10 in pass coverage, and they're missing 2 cornerbacks. So those are just the quarterbacks. But if you got to stack them with somebody, here are the 2 receiving options I'm going to give you. Amon-Ra St. Brown. He hasn't had a ceiling in his last 3 games. He's been 6 or 7 catches, 68 to 76 yards, and he hasn't scored. So there's been no ceiling. But you just go back just before that, he had been over 114 yards in a 3 of 4 game stretch. He scored 3 times. So we know it's there. And when he played the Bears last, 10 catches, $119. And again, Bears, like I said, they're down 2 corners. Goff's at home here. You could get similar numbers with a touchdown or 2. Again, Bears get no pass rush. And one other stacking partner, Cole Kmet's the one. He gets 5 to 7 targets a game. That's in 6 of his last 7, so we know he's going to get the ball. The last time he played Detroit, 74 yards, 2 touchdowns. His best game against the year. Even week 12 of last year, he went 8 for 65 against them. Now, why is Kmet going to be successful? Fields runs. The linebackers have to pinch up. The Bears will run Kmet on routes behind the linebackers. That is why he went off against them, and he will do that again because Fields crushed them on the ground last time. The Lions also allow the 4th most fantasy points to tight ends. They've allowed 10 touchdowns. Those are the players in that game, John, you want to stack up.
I can't agree more. And what do you think of the total? I mean, do you immediately go to the over? I'm thinking in game, like if this game does start out a little bit slower and you get anything 47 and a half points, maybe you've got to hammer the over, I think.
That's the right call, John. And you're always the gambling expert on this. And the end game is better. You want that number a little bit lower. You're tempting fate a little bit too much with the current number. But if you get that number to drop at all, I think you're 100% correct. That's where you gain your advantage. And if the game starts out high scoring, fade it. Because at that point, you may be paying up for too many points. But yeah, if you get that number a little bit lower, that number is really flirting with disaster, I think.
Yeah, I think so too. I like that fade with the under. And this game, you could see 60 plus points in game. I'm pretty confident of saying that. And speaking of the under, here's a little angle. And I would not bet this game under first and foremost, to be totally transparent on this, but this angle is pretty good and gets even better if we do get 60 points or higher to bet under in the in-game. We're going to play under with any team on the total off an upset loss of 10 or more points, and now is installed. Or I'm sorry, in the previous game, they were upset losses 10 or more points and were priced as a road favorite in that game. So that would be talking about Detroit when they went on the road and got pretty well creamed. They gave up, what was it, Jim? 350 rushing yards, I think it was.
Massive. Yes. Massive.
It was just incredible. And that defense had been playing well.
Yes. John, I talked about that on one of my other shows. I said, beware these small sample sizes. When they tell you his defense has been horrible all year, they didn't have an infusion of personnel. They made a couple coaching adjustments, but then teams adjust to those adjustments. So those small sample sizes that you see, they're short-lived. And that's exactly what you're saying here. So then you see him get hemorrhaged for 300 yards on the ground. That's the point. Teams adjusted. There's a talent deficiency there. You could smoke and mirror it for a little while, but at some point, you can't.
Yeah, I agree. And if you like Detroit, you're going to like this. And Detroit does play better at home than they do on the road. Goff has done much better on the road in the second half of the season, but they're at home, and that is major. So you bet against road teams that are on one or more consecutive losses. The Bears are on an 8-game losing streak if the game is played in January. That's all there is to it, Jim. 82 and 38 since 1980. That's 68% since 1980.
That's huge.
It doesn't get any simpler than that. It really doesn't. Why don't we talk about the San Francisco 49ers playing Las Vegas here, and in a game that means a lot to both teams. And this is a game that's going to be pretty darn good, I think. And I don't think it matters, personal opinion here, who's quarterback for the 49ers. That offense is designed to, dink and duck and hand the ball off, little short passes in the flat. And sometimes I think you and I can actually, do it. It's not a very complicated offensive scheme, but they execute it at a very, very high level. And I'll tell you, the Eagles might be in first place right now, but if I'm an Eagle fan right now, I'm not worried about the Dallas Cowboys, because the Cowboys would have to come to Philly, and we know how Philly is in home games. I'm more concerned about San Fran coming to meet the Eagles in the NFC Championship game. That's the team I think that can knock the Eagles off because of advantages on both sides of the ball. But what do you think of Purdy in this matchup?
So the thing with Purdy is the yardage is normally low because they don't ask him to throw a lot. They allow their defense to control the game. They do run the ball heavy. Now, defenses have really been focusing on Christian McCaffrey lately. He's getting some yardage, but he's taking a lot of attempts to get there. But the 49ers want to keep lowering the amount of plays. They want to shorten the game by running the ball. So the 49ers pick and choose their pass spots. Like you said, Purdy is schemed up perfectly to be able to move the ball. George Kittle after the catch has been a beast, and defenses can't bracket or double him because they use him as an inline blocker a lot of the time. And when they do, you can't commit resources to stop him as a receiver because they might run the ball. So they strategically choose when to put Kittle out into the formation. And that's why he's had multiple 2-touchdown games, 3 of them over the last 6 weeks, including 2 in a row. Completely unstoppable. He is the chess piece that has been utilized more once Deebo Samuel went out. We wondered who the beneficiary would be. They wanted it to be McCaffrey. But again, like I said, defense are closing in on them. So Purdy's going to get his touchdowns. It's 2 every game he gets. He should be fine for that. Just don't expect the yardage to be high because he doesn't throw enough passes.
I like it. I like it a lot. Any other players in that matchup? I'm wondering what happens to Carr if they don't make the playoffs. And it is a long shot right now for them to make it. Talking about the Las Vegas Raiders. It's one of the million questions that we have in our heads now about next season. But do you think Carr is an underplay here for like completions or yards or anything like that? Or just stay away?
It's funny. Nick Bosa, the brother of Joey Bosa was on record. Was it last year? He went public after the game as a Monday night game talking about how Derek Carr can't deal with pressure. And, Joey and Nick Bosa talk, and they know the point of getting pressure on Carr, and they're going to get pressure on him. That's going to be a bad situation. And it's not like Josh Jacobs could bail him out on the ground because I believe no running back has hit 70 yards. It might be 60, but none of them hit 70 yards against the Niners all year long. So Carr's in trouble here because he is going to be pressured, and I don't know how he gets out of that. One little backup, Brock Purdy for DFS is a cash game play. And that's why we brought him up. He's a cash game because of that 2-touchdown floor he gives you, and he's cheaply priced. You don't want to play him in a tournament because we don't see that 4-touchdown upside. We don't see that 300, but he is a good value in a cash game.
Love it. Absolutely love it. Another game that is pretty interesting here. One other thought here. I had this note, and I always mention this just about every show. The Circuit puts out betting lines for every single week of every single game before the season even starts. This game was originally lined with the Raiders as a -1.5 point favorite. It's now 6, probably going to go to 6.5 by game time, I would think. And that means that it has moved 8 points. Any game that has moved 8 points, and I used this in the Circuit contest last year, as a fade. So that little simple reasoning that the line has gone too far now makes the Raiders a bit of a live dog here, I think, especially if I'm able to get 6.5. And I know, that's a stunner because you just look at 49ers and there's no way they're losing this game. They're going to win by double digits, and why the line's too cheap. But I do think that gap, where the line opens preseason at a certain number and then moves 7 or 8 or 10 points more, anything more than 7, you want to consider a contrarian bet because it's hit 68% of the time over the last 3 seasons. So that's another little tidbit there, I guess.
And the 49ers, like we said, they want to keep the game lower scoring. They want to run the ball, shorten the game. And when you shorten the game, the scores are a little closer often. If you're only scoring 20 points, well, your opponent just gets to 14, 16. You've got a cover on your hands. And so that's all we're looking at. And that's the type of scenario that's going to happen. And look, Brock Purdy can make a mistake. He is still a young quarterback. And the Raiders will get some pressure from Max Crosby if they get into an obvious passing situation. So there are scenarios that are very plausible as to, like you said, the Raiders being a live dog.
Yeah, let's move on to the Indianapolis Colts in a similar situation. I mean, that franchise is in trouble. I mean, they really are not a good team. And I don't know whether I would use my contrarian circa bet idea here or not, but originally this was the Colts -3, Jim, over the Giants preseason. That's where our betting community expectations were for these teams. The Colts were going to be playoff bound. The Giants were going to be fortunate to get to 500, I guess.
Yes.
Probably what it was. It's now Giants -6. So this game has moved 9 points, which that little contrarian thing would put you on the Colts. But how can anybody in their right mind take the Colts? I know I won't be doing that. If they cover or if they win over the poor Giants, and cause the Giants fans more misery again for another consecutive year, then so be it. But I can't waste money putting anything on the Colts. What do you think of any opportunities here in this matchup?
I mean, the problem is the quarterback position. I told people when Nick Foles is coming in, don't worry. He is more hypersensitive to pressure than Matt Ryan is. And you saw it on the first interception. A defender was somewhere near his feet falling down, and Foles immediately just leaned backwards and threw the ball off his back foot, and it was an easy interception. But he is hypersensitive to pressure, and the Giants have been getting pressure. But what I like in this game, if you're playing props and DFS, I like the running backs in this contest. First of all, Saquon Barkley. Indianapolis, early in the season, we saw them as a shut-down run defense. We avoided them at all costs. Now, let's first talk about the positives of Saquon Barkley. He had really gone through a stretch where defenses were taking him away. Like we said, opponents make adjustments, and then the team who had those adjustments made to them make their own. And the Giants have made adjustments for Barkley. Barkley now has 84 and 87 rushing yards in each of his last 2 games after only hitting 63 once in the prior 6 games. And they've really figured out in the last 2 games how to get him better involved as a receiver. He's caught 13 of 16 targets in those 2 games, 82 yards total over those games. So he's getting it done there. He scored touchdowns 6 of the last 8 games. Now, like you said early, Indy has gotten a little worse against the run over the course of the season, especially on the edges you could get to them. And Barkley runs there. 6 different running backs have at least 77 yards against the Colts in their last 10 games. Doesn't sound like much, but it's a substantial number. 3 running backs have gone for at least 77 yards in their last 3 games. And this should still be a closer game because both teams want to run. The Giants should not be forced to pass. So, again, we shorten the game. The Giants should be okay, but they're going to keep it lower scoring. So we like Barkley's rushing prop over. And then the other side of the ball, we saw it last week. Zach Moss is their early down back. He will be involved as long as the game is close. And for the most part, they were within shouting distance most of the game against the Chargers. So Moss continued to see work. Now, 67% of the snaps in both games. He only had 12 carries against the Chargers, but 65 yards. He had 24 carries when they played Minnesota. But like I said, the Giants don't blow anyone out. So Moss should flirt with 20 carries here. Now, the Giants, they've allowed at least 60 rushing yards to 9 running backs in their last 7 games, which means 2 running backs in the same game have gone over that number. Giants are a bottom 5 run defense. So I like Zach Moss as a cash game play. I like Saquon Barkley as either a tournament or a cash game play. I like both of those running backs to go over their rushing prop yardage because I don't think there's much passing at all in this game.
And with that said, I kind of lean to the under already. My model does have a slight lean to the under, and that makes a lot of sense that they're just going to run. And I really do hope the Giants at least win. Maybe the Colts cover because those Giant fans deserve something good to happen for a season.
Yes.
Especially the way Barkley plays. I like that play with him over rushing yards and all the other ones you mentioned. But he's really brought the load the last couple of games, and without him, they would not be 8-6. But betting the under with a home team, which would be the Giants in this case, after 2 or more consecutive wins against the spread, has a winning record on the season, and is playing a losing record team after week 8 or the second half of the season. 70%, Jim, 55-23 with 2 pushes last 10 seasons. It's gone 4-0 this season alone. 18-4 the last 3 seasons. So this thing is pretty hot, and it has not had a losing record season following this simple to follow situational angle in 10 years. So every single one of the seasons in 10 years, each one of them has made a profit. And it's going to do it again because it's already 4-0.
Yeah, it is going to be 5-0, like you said. That's a great play. Fantastic play.
Let's move on to Arizona and Atlanta, two teams that have basically nothing to play for except for maybe some personal things in their contracts, certain achievements during the year. I don't even know what that would be right now, but neither one is they're both eliminated. Here again, Arizona preseason by circa -4 points, road favorite over Atlanta, which if we go back to preseason, that made complete sense. We knew Atlanta was going to be pretty bad. We expected Arizona to be a playoff bound team, which
Yes.
they hardly accomplished that. So they have vastly underperformed. Now, Atlanta, with only 5 wins on the season, is a 3.5 point home favorite. And I kind of lean in here with the dog because Arizona has been basically out of it. Atlanta was eliminated last week. I think that the drop off in performance here is going to affect some of the Falcon players quite a bit. What do you think, Jim?
John, just like we talked about with the Giants and the Colts, both of these teams need to run the ball. Arizona may have Colt McCoy back from the concussion, but Colt McCoy obviously is a career backup. If it's him or Trace McSorley, James Conner has been running the ball very well. At least 63 rush yards in 5 of his last 6 games. He's also at least 20 receiving yards in his last 4. He scored in 5 straight. He plays like 97% of the snaps in almost every game over the last month and change. And Atlanta has given up at least 86 rushing yards 6 times in their last 8 games. Now, Atlanta hasn't given up a rushing touchdown in their last 4, but they've given up 7 in their last 9 games. So this is a game where James Conner is going to have success on the ground. We love DeAndre Hopkins. We love Marquise Brown. But with the quarterback play, they're just not going to get the production out of them. And if Conner is running well, they will stick with him to a degree. So I like not just him for DFS, but his prop bet over. And just like in the Giants game, we're going to go to the other running back, Tyler Algier, who I was not on last week because they were playing Baltimore. Well, Tyler Algier has proved a lot to me in the last 6 weeks. But let's say the last 2 weeks alone, Cordero Patterson had been leading the backfield in carries. But in the last 2 weeks, Algier has 35 carries to 21 for Patterson. So he's basically taking the backfield over. In those games, Patterson's barely at 3 yards a carry. Algier is at 6 yards per carry. And in the last 5 games, the rushing yards for Algier, despite limited usage until last week, 55, 54, 52, and then with the enhanced usage, 139 and 74. And his Algier's last 4 matchups were all against tougher run defenses. Now he faces the bottom 7 Arizona run defense that just lost a linebacker to injured reserve. And this defense has given up at least 70 rushing yards recently to Fournette, Pierre Strong, Latavius Murray. So Tyler Algier is a strong DFS play, cash or tournament, and they both, for their prop bet, both he and Conner, over the rushing yard total.
I love it. And guys and gals, when you do your DFS, what you can do is go to rotowire.com. They have a great optimizational tool, and you can before you get your lineups, add these players in and like them. They're automatically put into the lineups and then optimized. And that's a great way to have a good chance of making some serious money in those bigger DraftKings, like the $20 entry where you have a chance to win $1 million. I'm not saying you're going to win $1 million by listening to us, but you have a chance to at least cash and have some excitement because it is fun. Jim, I must say, your plays last week, I was in a smaller one, not the big $1 million one, but the number one prize was $100,000, and I finished 159, which was only like 500. But still, I would not have made 500. I might not have made anything had it not been for the tweaking that I did based on your research.
Yeah, we listen to each other. Like I said, information. We try to gain a little advantage. And like we said earlier in the show, take what John and I say, analyze it, consider it, match it with your thoughts. If you have a match where it works, play it. If you don't, fade it. But John and I will do as much research as we can, watch the games, understand it, and provide you the best possible product.
Absolutely, every single time. Let's look at least one more game here, Jim. The LA Rams, the defending Super Bowl champions. I believe they still will have the worst record for a defending champion, but they were decimated by so many injuries that I don't even know if a team has ever had as many injuries to key starters than the Rams did this year. The total before in the preseason by the circa was at 50 and a half points, Jim. It's now down to 41 and a half and plunging. I'm liking the over here in this game, and I know you have a couple player prop too that will probably support the over in this game. Chargers were a minus 1.5 point favorite preseason at the circa. They're now 6.5. I hope it doesn't go higher because I think this Chargers team is on a mission. And I did an article preseason over at gambling.com that identified the Super Bowl participants. And what I did, Jim, is I went through other articles from respected sources and I tallied up what the most popular picks were. And of course, it was Buffalo. Of course, it was in the NFC. It was Tampa Bay was one of them. So I identified ones that nobody was picking, and I actually put $10 on this, and it's 80-1. The Chargers against the 49ers. So I'm kind of excited about this playoff season just for that little pizza money bet. It's pretty good. And for those that aren't agree with that, Jim, it's still at 60-1.
What, really? Wow. Yeah. And whenever they get Joey Bosa back, I'm hoping it's soon. I'm hoping it's this week.
I think he's scheduled this week.
Oh, it's so huge for him to get him back. And this team was ravaged, decimated by injuries. John, my biggest preseason bet was over 10 wins for the Chargers. And right now, if they win their last two, they cash it. If they win one, they push it. I would be glad to get the push because those injuries were catastrophic. And but now I got a chance to actually cash. They're playing a 5-win team and a 4-win team to close the season. And if they don't choke, that bet cashes. And I sold that bet out to a lot of people this season.
They have a chance to move up in the wild card part of the AFC conference too by winning those last two games. And I don't see them losing either one.
Yeah, I mean, realistically, they're going to be favored. If they do their job, they'll win. But it's the NFL. We know how that goes.
It is not for long, as we like to say, and it's overused, but it's true.
And in terms of the game, you asked me about players. I like the Chargers defense here. Baker Mayfield, people are getting all excited about Baker Mayfield. Look, at the end of the day, there were tight end screen passes that were going. They got like 100 yards for Higbee, a couple touchdowns. It was flukish. They're not moving the ball against the Chargers through the air. The Chargers are going to be in the backfield as much as Mayfield, but they're going to be able to run the ball. Cam Akers has really been playing well. Weeks 1 to 9, he averaged 2.7 yards per carry. He looked like he was done. It looked like that Achilles injury was never going to be returned from. Then weeks 10 to 14 after his benching, he went from 2.75 yards to 3.89. All right, that's better. Not league average, but close, right? And he was getting more work. And then the last 2 weeks, 5.2 yards per carry. He's also caught 5 passes for 64 yards. He has 183 yards on the ground in those 2 games, scored 3 touchdowns last week. Cam Akers looks like he's back. And the Chargers, they've given up at least 89 rushing yards to 10 different running backs this year, and they've given up that 89 yards in 7 of the last 9 games. So Cam Akers, they're going to keep him as involved as long as possible. And the Chargers, look, even last week, they don't really blow teams out. They keep the game. They let teams hang around. That means Cam Akers, the game script, is going to be there. And so that's big. So I like Cam Akers as rushing prop yardage total over, and I like him as a cash game play this week because he is fairly cheap. Those are my 2 plays, the Chargers defense and Cam Akers.
Yeah, and I think that makes sense. I mean, the Chargers will let them run the ball, and it just makes sense to me. It could be another one of those 27-10 games, but Akers goes over 100.
Yep.
I can definitely see that happening. One other game I wanted to look at was the Washington Commanders are lurking for the playoff spot. And I believe they made a change at a quarterback, which is somewhat surprising. But, that's the dysfunction of that franchise, at least until Mr. Snyder gets it sold, I suppose, right? But Dodson, Penn State kid, has really done well the last couple of weeks. And I know you like him as a player prop. So I'll turn it over to you, and you can tell us why.
Yeah, Jahan Dotson, I really like him as a GPP play. High variance player here. He scored a touchdown in his last 3 games. His yardage, 54, 105, and 76, averaging 5 catches and 8 targets. What I like about Dotson is this. His ability to go up and get the ball, despite being a smaller guy, not a big receiver, but he goes up and he'll take the ball away from defenders. So when you have a quarterback, you have Taylor Heineke or Carson Wentz like this week, they're not the most accurate throwers. Dotson has shown he could get the ball despite that. And they're facing a Cleveland team that, yes, Cleveland has a 7th best pressure rate. Washington is bottom 10 in their pass protection. These are per Pro Football Focus. But that means Wentz is going to have to get the ball out a little more quickly. That lends to Dotson having a really good game. McLaurin can win anywhere, but they like him downfield. They may not have time for that to develop. So this could be a game where Dotson does extremely well. Cleveland, as I said, they're going to mainly focus on McLaurin. Dotson is the guy, even in a lower volume game. If he gets at 8 targets, he could get you 100 yards. He could get you a touchdown. He's volatile, so he's a GPP play.
Yeah, and Washington sets up in that system I mentioned earlier, Jim. You bet on home teams that are facing a visitor on a 1 or more game losing streak in the month of January. That's all there is to it.
That's it.
68% winners, since 1980.
Man,
I
that's
love that
incredible,
one.
John.
And you don't have to have a spreadsheet to track it. You just, look at road teams. You're going to bet against them if they're on a 1 or more game losing streak in January. That's all there is to it.
Oh, John, that's probably the last game I'm going to be able to do for today.
Okay.
I know we're getting back in on Saturday, though.
Yeah, we are. 11:30 a.m. I'm just going to quickly do this one, Jim, and then we'll sign off here. It's the Eagles, and I think the Eagles will annihilate the New Orleans Saints here, put them out of their playoff misery, and secure the number 1 seed, which is huge this year because only the number 1 seeds get a bye week. And that will be enormous for the Philadelphia Eagles to make a run for a Super Bowl championship this year. So you're going to bet on winning record home teams in the last 3 weeks of the regular season. The home team has a winning record on the season. The guest has a losing record on the season. And the guest is scoring less than 22 points a game, which is pretty pathetic, with all due respect. 40-10, straight up 80%. So you want to keep that in mind because if the Saints would score first, that doesn't mean it's the end of the world for your Eagles bet. Gives you an in-game opportunity to take advantage of, maybe even get the money line at that point. But overall, 30-17 against the spread for 64%. I think the Eagles will show everybody that Dallas game was just a loss. That's all it was.
Yep.
Jim, any final thoughts? Any action you want to talk about over at Rotowire? The floor is yours.
So with me, if you're follow both of us on Twitter, but if you're not following me at Jim Coventry NFL and you're a fantasy player or a bettor, I give prop bet threads. I give running back, wide receiver threads each week that go over a rolling 3-week trend in conjunction with the whole season. So we can constantly reframe players on Rotowire YouTube. We do 5 shows a week, including the show with John on Saturdays, going from this Saturday through the Super Bowl, 11:30 Eastern. And that would be great. So those are the main places you can catch up with me, and obviously rotowire.com. If you want 2 days free without a credit card at Rotowire, go to rotowire.com/try.
Awesome, Jim. And for those, I'll be doing a couple video clips in the college football, and the system I'm going to present to you will blow your socks off. And I'll tell you right now, I think Ohio State, as much as I like Georgia and being a Penn State fan, I don't like Ohio State. I think Ohio State is going to upset them. But I'll show you the system and why, and that's more important than my personal opinion.
Yes.
So thank you for your time, Jim. And make sure you get over to Rotowire, everybody. Use that optimization model. I use it personally, and it's worked. So on behalf of Jim, myself, Rotowire, and the Predictive Playbook TV channel, bet with your heads, not over it. And may all the wins be yours.